distinguished panelists, dear ladies and gentlemen, here in the Vasilevsky Hall, and all the people in front of their screens in a hybrid mode, we are starting our international seminar, New EU Member States Aspirations to Join the OECD, organized by the Economic Policy Institute in cooperation with the Embassy of Korea in Bulgaria. My name is Yasin Georgiev and I'm heading the Economic Policy Institute, and it is my great pleasure to start this international event here in Sofia. We have participants joining us from Bucharest, from Zagreb, and from other countries in the region. But the main focus here is to speak about the OECD, a topic that is of increasing importance for our countries. I would like, firstly, to highlight our excellent cooperation with the Embassy of Korea in Bulgaria. We have been cooperating successfully for more than 3 years, and we are very much looking forward to another event next week on Friday, bilateral forum between Bulgaria and Korea, which is part of our long-term project that aims to support young scholars and young researchers that bridge the distance between our both countries. But today we are here in order to speak about the path to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the path Bulgaria and the other countries in the region embarked on. The structure of the event, we have two main panels. The first panel will present the progress in the process of Bulgaria, its latest developments and the upcoming challenges. We are going to put an emphasis on the priority reform projects and priority reform areas. The second panel has an international outreach. It aims to provide the international and regional perspective. We will be starting with the contribution presenting the Korean experience in joining the OECD and how the recommendations coming from the OECD have been affecting or influencing Korea's economy, labor market, education, and public policy as a whole. And last but not least, the second panel aims at shedding light on the current stage of accession perspectives or accession preparation in Romania and in Croatia. These are the other two countries, peer countries in the European Union, that similarly to Bulgaria are on their way to the OECD. Let me say some more words. What is the goal of this initiative? What is the goal of this international seminar? Firstly, we would like to provide a deeper look into the joint efforts of various institutions here in Bulgaria that are involved within the OECD application. We would like to make this process more inclusive and to make more people aware and more stakeholders involved in this endeavor. By saying more people and more stakeholders, we mean academia, universities, think tanks, civil society as a whole. The second major goal is to increase the knowledge on the topic and to provide the regional background. And the third one is to sharpen public discourse of the application and why it matters. Why it matters? It matters for Bulgaria and for the Economic Policy Institute. For Bulgaria, after joining NATO in 2004 and the European Union in 2007, the OECD membership is considered one of the main national priorities, with an increasing intensity and significance, especially in the last several years. It aims at reaching at least three major goals: strengthening the positioning of Bulgaria globally and reconfirming our belonging to the international community. Second, it seeks to provide an additional incentive for reforms along with the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. And thus, it aims to improve the way public institutions work. And in this way, to increase the attractiveness of the Bulgarian economy and to improve the business environment. For EPI, these issues are of vital importance. The above-mentioned goals are in line with EPI mission, and this is really a very short one. When it was established in 1997, the Economic Policy Institute had two major goals. to contribute to utilizing the full potential of Bulgaria by enhancing the competitiveness of its economy and by increasing the efficiency of its public institutions. As you can see, it is fully in line with our OECD application process. I think I have been speaking too long. This is why I would like to wish all the speakers and all the participants here in the hall and all the participants online a very fruitful discussion and rich knowledge by the end of this event, useful networking, and all the success in preparing Bulgaria for a full-fledged membership in the OECD. Now, I would like to give the floor to our special guests. Firstly, I would like to invite here His Excellency Ambassador Lee, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to the Republic of Bulgaria, really appreciating your support for this initiative and really appreciating the support that comes from Korea for Bulgaria's OECD application. The floor is yours.
Благодаря, добро утро. Nazywam się Dawidia. Deputy Prime Minister Atanas Pekadompu, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to be here today to open this international seminar, New EU Member States' Aspiration to Join the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Since its launch in 1961, under the aim of achievement of economic growth, maintenance of financial stability, contribution to development of the world economy, OECD has led discussions on economic development of member countries and the world. This kind of effort have been made not only in economic sector, but also in the sectors of politics, society, environment, and others. Thus, it has promoted the policy coordination and economic cooperation among members, providing motivation for economic growth. The Republic of Korea, as the 29th member of OECD since 1996, has promoted domestic reform via adoption of OECD policy recommendation in a variety of fields, including attraction of foreign capital, deregulation, and anti-corruption, sharing experience with other member countries through peer review. Korea, accordingly, has achieved qualitative growth like reduction in working hours and increased labor efficiency, as well as quantitative development in FDI, GDP, and GDP per capita. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Bulgaria, with the purpose of pursuing further growth, has also made various efforts to join the OECD. As an ambassador to Bulgaria, I have witnessed the constant effort of Bulgaria and sincerely hope that such effort can bear fruit in the near future. On the occasion of the international seminar today, Bulgarian government's effort for joining the OECD will be presented, and also experience sharing with other countries will be made. I hope that today's seminar will be helpful for Bulgaria to obtain some useful lessons to enter OECD. Lastly, I would like to convey my special thanks to EPI for their dedication to make this seminar successful. Welcoming all of you, I wish for your health and good luck. Благодаря ви, че сте тук днес. До нови срещи. Благодаря.
Deputy Prime Minister Pekanov, I have the pleasure to welcome you here.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Mr. Ambassador Lee, Mr. Gurgiev, Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here, and I accepted this invitation with a pleasure to see today's seminar as a crucial part of the discussions, communication about the overall process and the forthcoming admission of Bulgaria, Croatia, and Romania to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. You know that Bulgaria has taken more than one step towards membership in recent years, as well as many actions to contribute to the convergence of the country with OECD values and standards. These steps have been of varying intensity and have reflected the current political and economic situation in Bulgaria, in the member states, as well as in the organization itself. However, everything changed on the 25th of January 2022, when Bulgaria this year was officially invited to start negotiations for full membership to the OECD. From this moment on, Bulgaria has started a large-scale preparation of the necessary activities for our accession to the OECD. The preparatory work was completed with the delivery of the roadmap for the admission of the Republic of Bulgaria to the OECD in June this year, after which all efforts were formalized and aligned with the OECD rules. It should be noted that the organization of the administration's work was completely reformatted as a result of two successive acts of the Council of Ministers regulating the decision-making procedures related to our accession to the OECD, the institutions responsible for this, for the compliance of the Bulgarian legal framework and the administrative practices with the OECD legal instruments, which is a crucial key step for us of ensuring that we are in line with all of these standards. I assure you that this is a serious ongoing effort that succeeded in tracing all the processes in the individual institutions, and I expect future organizational challenges to be sporadic. Next, I would like to draw your attention to what lies ahead. Following Bulgaria's self-assessment of its level of compliance with OECD legal instruments, a partnership has been established with the OECD services, and we expect our initial memorandum, the summary of the self-assessment of our level of compliance with the instruments, to be handed over to the OECD very soon. Then the formal OECD checks of what is identified in the self-assessments will begin. There will be technical reviews, visits, in general, a lot of joint and common work and efforts. I would like to note that in this year, very positive communication was maintained at the political level between Bulgaria and the OECD. Our representatives took part in a number of OECD fora, and the OECD Deputy Secretaries General visited Bulgaria several times. I would like to underline one important thing for me. Partnership, cooperation is the key and essential word for the 21st century. Through partnership, through cooperation, we can solve the global challenges. They cannot be solved by one country alone. They cannot be solved by one institution alone, one party or one government. Most of them can be solved only at the global level, seeking at solutions which are sustainable and fair for all. This is also something that we saw during the pandemic. Our common efforts, our common responses are a way to move forward, to ensure to citizens that institutions and governments are there to protect them and that they can do that in a sustainable manner. For me, this is the path forward also in these turbulent times when there is a lot of pressure, people are worried, the energy problems, inflation, but by cooperating better together, we are making the important steps to solve all of these problems. And for me, for Bulgaria, the path forward is through more active participation in all European processes, in all global processes, to ensure our active role in the decision-making and therefore decisions that are in line with the interests of the citizens. In conclusion, I would like to thank the organizers of today's events, the Economic Policy Institute, as well as the Embassy of the Republic of Korea for their support. The organization of an event where the administration meets at the political and expert level with representatives of the non-governmental sector is, for me, a sure sign and crucial that Bulgaria's admission to the OECD is a common priority for our whole society. This is one of the major points which has been a priority of all successive governments in recent years, of all political parties, and we can find a common consensus in these times of difficulties. This is why I would like to encourage state authorities and the non-governmental sectors for future similar events. And I see the support of the Korean Embassy at the forum as the support and confirmation of one of the most active, successful OECD members in Bulgaria to continue on this work and for all other future endeavors. So I see this as we are not alone on this path, we are all working closely together and we can move forward. Thank you for doing this, for developing a network of activities and forum dedicated to the future membership of Bulgaria in the OECD. But this is a crucial contribution for Bulgaria to be more active in all of the global processes. Thank you, and I wish good luck to the forum.
Thank you once again, Deputy Prime Minister Atanas Pekanov. And to conclude the official opening part, I would like to invite the Deputy Minister of Economy and Industry of the Republic of Bulgaria, Mr. Yanko Topalov.
Уважаеми господин вице-премиер, уважаеми господин Георгиев, Ваши превъзходителства, уважаеми дами и господа. Преди всичко бих искал да благодаря за възможността да участвам в откриването на това толкова важно и организирано в много подходящ момент събитие. Позволете ми да изкажа поздравленията си към екипа на Института за икономическа политика за организацията и към посолството на Република Корея в България. Заедно работим по много теми и искам да ви уверя, че ще продължим да бъдем един активен партньор в всички сфери от взаимен интерес. В днешната програма ще вземат участие представители на Министерството на икономиката и индустрията, които ще влязат в детайли по различни обсъждани теми. За мен е важно в рамките на официалното откриване да подчертаем водещата роля на семинара, който хвърля светлина върху реформите и стъпките, които са необходими в процеса за присъединяване към ОИСР. Тази абревиатура, която за съжаление все още е твърде абстрактна за една част от обществото, всъщност е един от ключовите приоритети в икономическата сфера пред България. През последните месеци десетки експерти работят денонощно, за да изпълним всички критерии и да видим страната ни като член на организацията. Затова днес ми се иска да отдадем внимание и на тези хора, на чието труд ще се основава успеха ни, в който ние не се съмняваме и които често остават скрити от светлината на прожекторите. Поздравления за десетките експерти в министерствата и всички други организации за техния труд и експертиза. Разбира се, за всяко ново предизвикателство, пред което се изправяш, най-важни са приятелите и тези, от които можеш да почерпиш опит. Затова още веднъж искам да благодаря на посолството на Република Корея и на всички организации и държави, които са с нас по този път. Намираме се във време на икономически и финансови изпитания, на редица кризи. Решението е колективен отговор на тези предизвикателства. Днешните събития в глобален аспект по най-категоричен начин ни показват, че само чрез съвместни усилия можем да постигнем устойчиво и икономическо развитие, повишаване на жизнения стандарт, както и да поддържаме финансова стабилност, от която всички се нуждаем. Успешното и навременно завършване на разговорите за присъединяване към ОИСР без съмнение ще стимулира допълнително България по пътя и към устойчиво икономическо развитие. То ще осигури и по-голямо признание за стабилността и потенциала на българската икономика. Ще направи България по-видима и по-атрактивна за инвеститорите. Ще послужи като гаранция за дългосрочното развитие на страната ни. Ясно е, че икономическите ползи от присъединяване към ОИСР няма да се усетят веднага, но процеса на присъединяване ще послужи като катализатор за жизнено важни вътрешни реформи. В това число в области като борбата срещу корупцията и ефективността на правната система. Така че това е една много голяма тема, която ще доведе до промени в цялото ни общество. Тези промени, сигурен съм, ще бъдат изцяло положителни. В заключение бих искал да подчертая още веднъж, че в края на този процес ще имаме по-конкурентна национална икономика, по-ефективна и съвременна публична администрация. Желая на всички участници в семинара успех в намиране на верните решения и за по-бързото достигане на крайната цел. Благодаря за вниманието.
Благодаря ви, заместник министър Топалов. So we can make smoothly a transition towards the real part of our event by starting the first panel, which is devoted to Bulgaria's OECD roadmap. This panel will provide a first-hand insight into the interinstitutional cooperation and coordination mechanism of the Republic of Bulgaria. It will provide mapping of several of the main priority policy and reform areas. And last but not least, it will outline the upcoming challenges and we will provide a platform for a joint discussion and elaboration on the solutions and their impacts on Bulgaria's public institutions and doing business environment features. I'm really happy to welcome here 5 distinguished speakers to tackle these issues. Firstly, we will be starting with Ms. Radka Balabanova, who is the Director of the Foreign Economic Relations and Development Cooperation Directorate at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And actually, in her capacity, she provides operational management of the interinstitutional coordination mechanism. And in having said that, I would like to mention that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is really a main point for coordinating this huge effort. Secondly, I would like to present to you Ms. Kristina Vladimirova, who is Director of the Foreign Economic Cooperation Directorate at the Ministry of Economy and Industry, also very important, already mentioned by the Deputy Minister of Economy. The third speaker will be Ms. Nežanka Koleva, who is Director of the Financial Markets Regulation Directorate at the Ministry of Finance. And then we are moving to Mr. Lachezar Petkov, who is the Director of the SME Internationalization Directorate at the Bulgarian Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Promotion Agency. The agency is the national contact point for responsible business conduct. And last but not least, it will be Mr. Svilen Kolev, the Deputy President of the National Statistical Institute of Bulgaria, who will be speaking about the statistical part of the accession process to OECD. Having said that, I would like also to mention that all the people in this hall, in the room, and all the people that are online could go to slido.com and could post their questions during the speeches of our distinguished speakers. The Slido hashtag is hashtag OECD_CEE, so please feel free to post your questions even before the time for questions and answers. And now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Radka Balabanova and to say, like, the general framework of our panel. I would like to ask all the speakers to stick to a limit of not more than 12 to 13 minutes in order to have enough time for questions and answers. So, once again, warm welcome to all of you here. We're looking forward to very insightful presentations and to even more useful discussion afterwards. Ms. Balabanova, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Georgiev. First of all, I would like to, on behalf of the Foreign Minister, who is chairing, as you mentioned, the interinstitutional coordination mechanism on the OECD, I would like to thank you, the Economic Policy Institute and the Korean Embassy for organizing this event. We really congratulate you and appreciate this effort, and we definitely need more events like this where we speak more about OECD so that we raise awareness of what OECD is about and what is the benefit and the added value of our membership in this important global organization. As was already mentioned earlier, Bulgaria's accession to the OECD is a strategic foreign policy priority. It enjoys broad political support and also institutional continuity. Several governments have been working on this, and also the caretaker government has put very high on its agenda the work on Bulgaria's accession to the OECD. Being part of this community of states sharing the values of democracy, of individual liberties and rights, and preserving human rights, upholding the principles of open market economies and rules-based international order, has become even more important in the current geopolitical situation. It is very important for Bulgaria to reconfirm its belonging to this international community. And we believe that with our active cooperation and participation in a number of OECD OECD initiatives until now, we have proved that Bulgaria is a like-minded country able to contribute to the work of this organization. Before going to some more details about the accession process and itself and the cooperation that we have had until now, I would like to briefly highlight some of the benefits or the added value of Bulgaria's membership in the OECD, both for Bulgaria and the organization. Now, firstly, and probably the most evident part is the reputational benefits. Of course, membership in the OECD is already a clear signal to investors that the country has a stable and effective and well-functioning economy with effective public policies. And this attracts investments, and this obviously helps economic growth and creates more jobs and leads to economic prosperity. But then we also have the effect on the public policies. Being part of the OECD means that the governments commit to permanently seek how to improve their economic policies. Actually, OECD members are engaged in a constant search for better solutions to the challenges they face, and we know there are a number of challenges that all the world face. OECD is a huge reservoir of expertise, and having access to this, to all the research and analytical work is clearly something very important and helps in the design of effective tools to address the challenges. Member states of the OECD benefit from the peer reviews. This is the unique working method of the OECD, where all member states discuss between them and learn from each other, from their experiences, and they can benefit from the lessons learned of their colleagues. During these discussions, during these peer reviews, policy recommendations are given, and they're being discussed, and this is a way also to gain public support for the reforms that are deemed to be necessary. OECD is also the most trusted source of comparable statistic data. And this is also an opportunity for us to compare ourselves with the most developed world economies, which is clearly an impetus for us to become a better version of ourselves, if I can put it this way. We believe that becoming member of the OECD would also contribute to our self-confidence as a country that is part of the global community and that participates on an equal footing in the design and implementation of global standards in a number of areas. And last but not least, Bulgaria's membership in the OECD would contribute to the OECD global and regional outreach. Bulgaria is member of a number of regional organizations, and this helps spreading the OECD standards and best practices across our region. For example, Bulgaria is currently chairing the Central European Initiative, and on 7th of November, we will host the Foreign Ministers meeting of Central European Initiative member states. And on that occasion, we will have a high-level delegation of the OECD. Secretary General of the OECD, Matthias Cormann, will be in Sofia and will take part in the informal dinner. And on that occasion, he will also meet the president. So this is clearly an example how OECD and regional organizations can work together and create synergies. And to that end, Bulgaria can contribute with its active work. So where do we stand as a starting position for the accession process? Bulgaria has applied to become member of the OECD in 2007. Over the years, this application has been repeatedly confirmed by different governments. In 2017, a special interinstitutional coordination was set up, which was recently strengthened and upgraded to meet, to address the challenges that stem from the accession process. And thanks to this active work in the recent years, we have seen an enhanced cooperation with the OECD, and now Bulgaria is considered as one of the most active OECD partner countries. We participate in a number of OECD bodies and committees, and we have adhered to a number of OECD legal instruments. And it is very important to note that out of the 8 legal instruments which are considered as key when assessing the preparedness of a country to become member of the organization, Bulgaria has adhered to 7. And the remaining one is the codes of liberalization, and we have been working actively on that also. So this already shows that Bulgaria is in a good starting position, demonstrates our preparedness to become a member of the organization, evidence of the fact that Bulgaria's legislation, policies and practices is to a large extent aligned with OECD best practices and standards. I would like also to mention that Bulgaria's organizations, the trade unions and the organizations of Bulgarian employers take part in the advisory groups to the OECD, BIAC, Business in OECD, and TUAC, Trade Union Advisory Committee, which demonstrates that also stakeholders outside of the government can contribute and is already contributing to the work of the OECD, and voices of these stakeholders can be heard in the discussions in the OECD. Bulgaria has also become member of the Nuclear Energy Agency of the organization in January 2021, which is another evidence of Bulgaria's like-mindedness and ability to contribute to the work of the organization. Now, what lies ahead? After the decision in January 2022, the decision of the Council to open accession negotiations with the 6 countries, on 10th of June, the accession roadmap was adopted. This document of the OECD sets out the rules, the stages of the accession process. It consists mainly of the substantial part of the process are the technical reviews, in-depth technical reviews, which will be done by the substantive committees of the OECD. There are 25 substantive committees which will evaluate Bulgaria's alignment and ability to implement the OECD standards in a very broad range of areas, from regional development, investment, financial markets, health, agriculture, education, small and medium enterprises, and a lot of. So it basically covers the whole range of economic and social policies. The first step, as was mentioned by Vice Prime Minister Pekanov, is the submission of the initial memorandum. We are currently working very actively and almost finalizing it. And this initial memorandum consists of a self-assessment, our first self-assessment of the extent to which our legislation and policies and practices are aligned with the OECD standards. Basically, we have to prepare self-assessments on all and each legal instrument of the OECD, and there are more than 250 legal instruments. So this is indeed a huge work which is being done by the experts in all ministries. And once we submit the initial memorandum, the substantial part of the accession process will start. The technical reviews will start, and they are in discussions with the member states, with the experts from the member states. We will have the opportunity to identify areas where we can or we should improve things and strengthen the legislation where needed. Now, what comes from this first self-assessment, because I said we are almost ready with it, so we already have a general idea what is our self-assessment. It seems our self-assessment is that to a large extent our legislation, practices and policies are aligned with the OECD standards and principles. There are some legislative amendments needed which have been identified and that are already in the pipeline. So we have also understanding of what can be done to improve our legislation. But this initial first assessment gives us confidence that we are in a good starting position and that we will be able to conclude the accession process in a relatively short time. And this is the ambition to really invest all the efforts needed and to be able to join the organization, as I said, in a relatively short time. Based on the experience from previous enlargements, we think within 3 years' time it could be reasonable. But of course, this depends on a number of factors. So I'm afraid I have been too long, or am I?
I think it's a very good start, but please.
I just wanted in the end to say that accession to the OECD is not an end in itself. It simply engaged the country in a more determined way it means that the country becomes part of a community of countries that are working to always improve themselves and to always work for better solutions, for the most appropriate solutions to the challenges they face. And probably you know, but I would like to finish with this, that the motto of the OECD is better policies for better lives. Thank you.
Ms. Balabanova, thank you very much for your intervention, which was both a general picture of Bulgaria's path towards the OECD, but also zooming in into very technical issues like all the steps that we have to accomplish on the way to be a formal member of the OECD. And what I would like to highlight, even before I give the floor to the next speaker, is the fact that you mentioned that the OECD is not the final goal. I mean, it's not not an end per se. And I really liked your sentence that it aims to make us a better version of ourselves, which is really something important. And of course, better policies for better lives, which is of paramount importance for increasing living standard and for making people for making people's life better. And I think for this reason, OECD is also very, very important for Bulgaria. And now I would like to continue with this part of the first panel with all the initial statements, and I would like to give the floor to Ms. Kristina Vladimirova, already mentioned. She is the director of the Foreign Economic Cooperation Directorate at the Ministry of Economy and Industry, and I'm very much looking forward to see what lies ahead in front of your ministry.
Thank you very much. We highly appreciate the decision of OECD member states from 25 January 2022 to start the enlargement process of the organization and the invitation to Bulgaria to start talks for the accession to the OECD. Joining the OECD is one of Bulgaria's most significant foreign policy priorities. I would like to express our gratitude to the Institute of Economic Policy and to the Embassy of Republic of Korea in Bulgaria for organizing this seminar dedicated to the accession of Bulgaria and the other two EU member states that also receive invitations, Croatia and Romania. This seminar provides an opportunity for an expert-level discussion and an informal exchange with the participants from Romania and Croatia on the upcoming process of the talks on accession to the OECD and on our goals and to the challenges facing our countries. Following the receipt in June 2022 of the roadmap of the OECD accession process, Bulgaria has launched a process that we hope will confirm our commitment to the values declared by OECD and our readiness to adopt and implement high standards and best practices of the OECD. Bulgaria is fully committed to the ambitious and comprehensive accession process, and we believe that it will be catalyst for carrying out the necessary reforms. The Ministry of Economy and Industry actively participate in integrity cooperation mechanism established to prepare Bulgaria's accession to the OECD. The Ministry is determined to take all the necessary actions as well as to actively participate in the further process in order to successfully conclude Bulgaria accession negotiations within a reasonable time. Experts from the Ministry participate in the work of 25 working bodies and the number of OECD forums which are within the competence of the Ministry. The Ministry of Economy and Industry was the leading agency in the process of OECD Economic Review of Bulgaria 2021 and OECD Review of Investment Policy of Bulgaria 2022. Under the current structure of the Council of Ministries, investment policy falls within the competence of the Ministry of Innovation and Growth. Ministry of Economy and Industry actively participate in the preparation of the initial memorandum of Bulgaria. The ministry is the leading agency for 4 technical reviews by the Corporate Governance Committee, by the Consumer Policy Committee, by the Trade Committee, and the Working Group of Export Credit and Credit Guarantees, and by the Steel Committee. The ministry is a partner agency in 11 more technical reviews. As a leading agency, ministry prepared self-assessment for 21 OECD legal instruments and participate as a partner institution in the preparation of self-assessment for 53 legal instruments that are within the competence of other OECD working bodies. According to the decision of the interagency coordination mechanism, for interagency working groups were created for participation in technical reviews by the thematic committee of OECD, and for which the ME is the leading agency. The task of the interagency working groups include the preparation of self-assessment of compliance with the OECD legal instrument in relevant thematic area, positions, opinions, report, and so on, proposals for action in accordance with the recommendations made in the framework of technical reviews for changes in the legislation and reforms of the policies and practices of Bulgaria, Bulgaria's final position on legal instruments, principles, standards in the relevant thematic area, and etc. Following the official submission of initial memorandum of Bulgaria to OECD, planned for the beginning of November 2022, Ministry will participate as a leading agency in the technical reviews of 4 thematic committees of OECD. As part of these reviews, it is expected to receive significant number of requests for additional details and in relation to the information included in the memorandum, as well as in relation to certain policies and practices of Bulgaria. In-depth reviews of Bulgarian legislation, policies and practices will help us identify areas where improvements and reforms are needed. Ministry will be participating in the implementation of decision of the interagency coordination mechanism for further actions related to the updating of National Roadmap 2021-2023 for Bulgaria's activity on the accession of OECD, the development of a special communication strategy for the accession to OECD and promoting the benefits of Bulgarian membership in the organization. We are at the beginning of a accession process and expect to encounter many difficulties and challenges. We count on the active and constructive support of OECD Secretariat and close cooperation with Romania and Croatia throughout this accession process. We hope that this seminar will help to establish even closer cooperation between our countries. We believe that Bulgaria's membership in OECD will have a positive impact on the Bulgarian economy by strengthening its stability and increasing the confidence of international financial circles and investors. Access to OECD information, comparable statistics and research will enable us to improve the analysis, development, and implementation of national economic strategies and policies for sustainable economic development. Full membership in OECD will allow the Bulgaria to participate along with other member countries of the organization in decision-making in the area of foreign economic policy to upgrade and improve the implementation of open foreign trade policy, thank you very much for your attention.
Ms. Vladimirova, thank you once again for being with us and for providing the perspective of the Ministry of Economy and Industry. And since economy goes hand in hand with financial issues, it is really a good connection to hand over to Ms. Nezhanka Koleva, the Director of the Financial Markets Regulation Directorate at the Ministry of Finance. And as we know, the Ministry of Finance is also very much involved into the issue of Bulgaria's accession to in the OECD, not only with issues related to reviews and assessment, but also some strategies like the financial literacy strategy, which is maybe something that is much closer to the wider audience. But I'm not willing to take the floor from you. So, Ms. Koleva, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Economic Policy Institute and the Embassy of the Republic of Korea in Bulgaria for organizing this event and for their kind invitation. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. Actually, my work is much easier because I'm going to talk after the previous speakers who already outlined the main principles and priorities for Bulgaria in this process. I'm going to focus my intervention mostly on one specific area, which is financial services and financial markets. However, I'm going to mention also the other areas where the Ministry of Finance is the leading authority in this process. And this is the budget review, the economic review, the liberalization of movements of capital, tax issues, corporate governance of state-owned enterprises, and some other issues. So you can see that the role of the Ministry of Finance in this process is really important, along with the other institutions, of course. Regarding the financial services and financial markets fields, we have two committees where we are the leading authorities. The first one is the Committee on Financial Markets. We are participating in the work of this committee since 2013. So you can see it's almost a decade we have experience with participating in the work in this committee. And the second one is the Insurance and Private Pension Committee. Our role there is much newer. We are participating there since 2020. And for this committee, we are the co-leading authority together with the Financial Supervision Commission. During the last months, we started to participate more frequently also to other working formats. One of them is the Task Force on Financial Consumer Protection. And as you mentioned, the financial literacy is a big topic for us. The Ministry of Finance is the leading authority for this topic. And we made a huge achievement during the last years in this field. Since 2018, the ministry is the leading institution in Bulgaria for financial literacy. We coordinate the working party, which has more than 50 authorities participating, together with the Ministry of Education and Science, other ministries and institutions that have competence in this field. From 2020, the ministry is full member of the International Network for Financial Educations in OECD, which is the very active body in terms of financial literacy and financial education. We have also experience with OECD assistance in a 5-year project, which we started in 2019. The project is a regional project with 5 more South and East Europe countries. And under this project, we developed our first national strategy for financial literacy, which was adopted in early 2021. Together with the strategy, we adopted an action plan for financial literacy, which covers 5 years of period, starting in 2021 until 2025. We are working very actively in implementation of the strategy and the action plan. And very soon we are going to make public a new portal on financial literacy, where the Ministry of Finance is the managing institution. So this is an achievement we have achieved with the support of the OECD. So you can see we already have some experience working together with OECD bodies. Regarding the self-assessment periods, as I mentioned, we are the leading, our team is the leading institution for 2 committees. And under these committees, we have 14 legal acts, legal instruments. And we already did our initial self-assessment, so it's quite positive. As Ms. Balabanova mentioned, the starting point is really good. So for most of them, we consider ourselves like fully aligned. So as a conclusion, I can say that this process is really challenging. It needs hard work, but at the same time, we see huge benefits of for future participation in OECD. And we rely very much on our members of the working groups and other stakeholders during this process, because the hard work is yet to come. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions later on.
Okay, thank you very much. The hard work is yet to come, which is a message that aims to mobilize all our resources. And now, before I open for questions and answers, I would like to continue with 2 more speakers. The first one is Mr. Vachezar Petkov. As previously announced, he is the director of the SME Internationalization Directorate of the Bulgarian Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Promotion Agency, which is really instrumental in being the national contact point for responsible business conduct, which is really something that we have been observing for the last several months as a very important institution that started to assume also this responsibility. So, Mr. Petkov, you have the floor to share more with us.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank and congratulate at the same time the organizers for putting this event, which seems to be truly impressive. I can see so many familiar faces, high-ranking officials, experts in the field, and of course, I'm very happy to see my former colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, ambassadors, and members of the diplomatic corps. So let me start with this. The Bulgarian Small and Medium Enterprises Promotion Agency was established as the country's national contact point for responsible business conduct in conjunction with Bulgaria's quest for membership in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in September 2021. It was formed as a permanent mechanism for implementing the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises' responsible business conduct in Bulgaria by a decision of the Council of Ministers of September 17, 2021. As you know, each country can arrange its national contact point as long as it fulfills the OECD fundamental principles. We have seen now, with the passage of time and practice, this type of instrument, which has been used by over, I would say, 50 countries globally, it has begun to establish itself more and more successfully in the terms of implementing and supporting policies relating to responsible business conduct. This is achieved by creating and implementing promotional action plans for firms while preserving human rights at the same time. The national contact point in Bulgaria followed a similar strategy based on the notion of continuity. To that end, the Bulgarian Small and Medium Enterprises Promotion Agency team, in collaboration with members of the working group from the public and non-profit sectors, worked tirelessly during the current fiscal year to lay the groundwork for the successful future implementation of these initiatives, and that is producing the appropriate advertising materials and constructing the relevant regulatory framework. I want to focus on some of the most critical roles and objectives of the Bulgarian National Contact Point. First, that is encouraging voluntary compliance with the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct. Investigating cases of guidelines violations come next. Then we come to investigating and receive inquiries by the guidelines. I have to mention here as well that when issues of violations or inquiries are accepted for examination, the National Contact Point forwards them to the working group for review and resolution. We assist in the voluntary resolution of rights-related cases between interested parties for the implementation of the guidelines through mediation by referring the matter to the working group for appropriate consideration. Then, finally, we encourage communication and the development of mutually acceptable solutions for all parties involved while keeping to the norms of impartiality, predictability, fairness, and consistency with the guidelines and these regulations. Now, anyone interested in learning more about the planned functions and operation of the National Contact Point in Bulgaria may visit the website, which is, I have put it here for you, and that is www.bulgariancp.bg. Probably there would be some questions regarding the structure of the contact point, so I will very briefly described in a few words. As you know, the head of the National Contact Point is the executive, or maybe you don't know, but that's the executive director of the Executive Agency for Promotion and Small Medium Enterprises. He reports to the Minister of Innovation and Growth, and he has been appointed as head of the National Contact Point in 2021. Then we have the Secretariat of the National Contact Point, which performs administrative and technical support, expert provision of National Contact Point, and coordination with the working group. It organizes the preparation and holding of the working group meetings, ensures timely distribution of the agenda and materials for the panels, and runs the correspondence related to the working group's doings addressed to the working group's chairman and other activities. Here we come to an important point, and that is the working group itself. The door is open since ad hoc and external professionals from other departments, institutions, national employer labor groups, non-governmental organizations, and the academic sector, I see a few of those here, might be invited to the working group. The working group chairman is the head of the National Contact Point, who is the agency executive director by law. In his absence, the working group chairman transfers his powers to a person specifically authorized by him, a member of the working group, or a member of the secretariat. Now, we have multiple members of the working group, which include numerous ministries, institutions, trade unions, organizations, and so on. And finally, we finish with the National Economic Council, which is the governmental advisory body. The National Economic Council is designated as the Bulgarian National Contact Point oversight body, and it monitors its activities as a consultative body to the Council of Ministers. So if you have any further questions, you're more than welcome to ask them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petkov. for providing this comprehensive picture when it comes to the national contact point for responsible business conduct. And last but not least, we have already tackled the issue that the OECD is a source of comparative statistics and a pure, if I might quote Ms. Balbanova, reservoir of knowledge and expertise. And this brings us to the National Statistical Institute, who is represented by its vice president, Mr. Svilenkolev. So could you please briefly introduce us with all the things that are lying in front of you and what are the steps ahead?
Thank you, Yasin. First of all, I would also like to congratulate the Economic Policy Institute and the Embassy of Republic of Korea here in Bulgaria for organizing this event and putting forward the topic of OECD accession in front of us in terms of those times when we are also discussing the adoption of the euro. But of course, I would also like to thank you for the invitation to have the National Statistical Institute represented here at this most important topic as well. And last but not least, I would also like to thank you, Yasin, personally, and for your team for inviting us. I would like to also thank you, dear distinguished speakers on the table, for the good cooperation that we have with our National Statistical Institute by saying this, that the Institute is also represented in the interinstitutional coordination mechanism by our Deputy President, Mrs. Yancheva. So she's also participating and having the activities and participation of the National Statistical Institute in terms of the coordination mechanism. So we also have the experience in the in terms of the roadmap of Bulgaria, having in mind that also is the one of the main activities which has to be done in terms of going forward. The National Statistical Institute is also represented in the group which is dealing with the current economic review, which is now in the Ministry of Finance charge. So my participation is in the economic review group. The cooperation and the established connections between the National Statistical Institute and the Bulgarian administration are of most importance for the our main goal in terms of foreign policy for accession to the OECD. In terms of the activities which are done by the National Statistical Institute, I would like to say that we presented our self-assessment to the coordination mechanism. We adhere to the OECD Council of Good Statistical Practice since September 2018, and the National Statistical Institute is an associated member of the OECD Committee on Statistics and Statistical Policy and its industrial and its subsidiary bodies since 2019. So the National Statistical Institute is strongly committed to achieving full compliance with the recommendations in the fields of statistics. So having said that, we will align our sound statistical practices in terms of data, in terms of analytical statistics and data infrastructure, because this is one of the recommendation from the one part of the recommendation. So this will be a challenge in terms of of course, integration in the organization's reporting and information systems by the time of the accession. I would also like to stress that the professional independence of the Statistical Institute is, of course, first explicitly established in the Statistical Acts and the NSI's Rules of Procedure. So we are having this in mind as well. And I would also like to stress that in 2021, the Bulgarian Council of Ministers signed a commitment of confidence in statistics, which recognized the government's responsibility in providing appropriate conditions for the developing, production, and dissemination of official statistics, while of course guaranteeing the professional independence of the National Statistical Institute. In terms of legal instruments, the National Statistical Institute is the leading institution in legal instrument which is related to statistics, and it's co-leading the legal instrument related to foreign direct investments alongside with the Bulgarian National Bank. I would also like to stress that, of course, in terms of other national statistical authorities, the National Statistical Institute is not the only one statistical authority in the country. So alongside the Bulgarian National Bank, National Revenue Agency, and other national statistical authorities, those are the, of course, institutions which are having the statistical data. It's not only the National Statistical Institute in this regard. So we are also partnering institution alongside around 20 other legal instruments of the OECD. And of course, the National Statistical Institute is providing data and assistance if some other authorities or ministries are needing for their self-assessments. So we're also a contact point on that. In terms of macroeconomic statistics, because my expertise, or I'm in charge of the macroeconomic statistic directorate in the institute, there are some challenges and changes which are coming in terms of national accounts on global level. So we are following them closely. In terms of OECD, there's an ongoing review of the system of national accounts, which is going to take part till 2025. So there may be new challenges ahead. And the system of national accounts is the core of producing the numbers for GDP, GDP growth, and so on. So I would also like to stress that pursuant to the provisions of the Statistics Act, the National Statistical Institute uses administrative data for statistical purposes. So public institutions are also engaged in statistical activities like providing data for statistical surveys. Of course, in terms of the specific legislation which they are following, and the central and local government authorities, the Bulgarian National Bank, the bodies which are also keeping statistical registers and data. Information systems are stipulated by the law to provide data upon request. So I would also like to stress that in this process of the accession to the OECD, it will be important those registers of those authorities also to be strengthened so that the data would be consistent. So if we need a better comparison of the data in terms of countries and OECD members, this would be also a crucial point. The registers which the authorities have to be strengthened and in terms of quality of the data. I would also like to point something else, which was this week. This is the conference on national economic and financial accounts, which was held in the OECD Center in Paris and also online. There are many experts in terms of worldwide and not only European-wide stage set the future challenges which are ahead in terms of the national accounts. So this will be also one of the things which we have to have in mind in terms of statistics, because not only the requirements will increase, but the need of more data in terms of comparison, and also the quality of the data would be of most important, and many new ways to collect the data and interpret the data were presented on that conference on the OECD hosting that conference. So I would also like to thank you once again. By that I would now finish to have more time for questions or discussions if you may have something in terms of statistic or something else. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to draw your attention kindly to our questions and answers session. People who are in front of their screens could use Slido, or even you here in the hall could use Slido by typing the hashtag on the left hand side and post your question. The people who are on Zoom could also do it, but we have not to skip the traditional way of asking questions. We have a micro, so if you would like to use the conventional way to comment, to ask, or even to contradict, please feel free to raise your hand and you will be given the chance to speak. Before digesting this comprehensive information, and before letting some time for rounding up your questions or remarks, I have prepared a couple of teasers to start the discussion as a moderator, and several general questions and several more detailed. Of course, I'm not willing to abuse my right as moderator, so when there are enough questions online and in the room, I'll be more than happy to hand over to you. As you can see, we have already one question on Slido, and I'm going to read it out loud in a second. But before that, we have been speaking about OECD accession the whole morning. But I would like to hear from you. And it is not a question that is obligatory for all of you, but maybe for those of you willing to answer. So it might be useful for us to see what is the distinction when it comes to EU enlargement negotiations and negotiations to join OECD. Of course, EU accession negotiation is something that happened not so, I mean, relatively long time ago. And we have here in the room people who contributed a lot to the fact that Bulgaria is now part of the EU, like Ambassador Benisheva, who I can see, and Mr. Kalyan Simeonov, who was also here. And I'm not willing to skip anybody else from this negotiation team at that time. But maybe if you could elaborate briefly, what is the difference? What is the distinction? Is there a distinction in this process? And when we speak about negotiation, about a membership, how can we benefit from the experience that we accumulated from this our not so recent past, but actually it is like 20 more than 20 years ago, actually, the real negotiation to the EU. Maybe Ms. Balabano, you can elaborate a little.
Yeah. Thank you. I had the privilege and the pleasure also to participate in that process, and I'm very happy that Mrs. Benisheva is here because she was my boss then and I learned a lot from her. So it is true that there are a lot of similarities, and it is not by chance that our coordination mechanism on the OECD accession is very much based on what we have already as EU accession coordination mechanism. We are building up on the experience we have gained and on the achievements that we had. Now, both processes, OECD accession process and EU enlargement process, have evolved over the years, have become more rigorous, more complicated in a way, so and more challenging for the countries undergoing these processes. During the EU accession talks, we really we implemented deep reforms that really transformed our countries. So that's why I say we are now building up on these achievements, because it is precisely because we are EU member state that we feel now well prepared to become OECD member as well, because we have the fundamentals that we need to strengthen and probably to improve in some ways. But this is the good starting point that we have. Now, the OECD accession, what is key in my mind is the dialogue, these accession talks, and it is very often we are reminded that these are accession talks, not accession negotiations, because we will be engaged in a dialogue, in a spirit of cooperation with the experts from the member states. And these dialogues aimed at helping us identify where and what we can improve to move closer to the OECD standards. So in these processes, we will rely a lot on the advice, on the support from OECD member states, sharing their experiences and helping us improve what needs to be improved based on their experience also. So the end of the process is not just that we will become OECD member state, but that we will have more efficient, more effective public policies to the benefit of our citizens and of the businesses. Thank you. Maybe.
I can just add some more things. Since I was involved in the EU pre-accession period as well, I worked for the ministry for more than 20 years. And I was part of the team that was working hardly on 2 chapters during pre-accession period. That was free movement of capital and free provision of services. And I can completely agree with Ms. Balabanova that today we are more ready than before, because during the last more than 15 years, we gained lots of experience during our full participation in EU work and EU institutions. We gain expertise, experience. During the pre-accession period and during the last 15 years, we managed to build our administrative capacity, our institutional capacity. So the starting point is very different now. We have the capacity to top up what we need to do in terms of our accession to OECD. So we have the experience to participate in decision-making process and policy-making process at the European level, and experience to negotiate, to draft legislation. So it will be much easier once we become a full member of OECD. But even during the pre-accession period, our work is much easier. I think the only weakness we face, at least from the Ministry of Finance perspective, is that during the EU pre-accession period, we had dedicated staff working only on EU issues, a dedicated budget, and now we don't have this. Now we have, more experienced staff, of course, but it's the same staff who works on the EU issues and the OECD issues, so it's a bit challenging in terms of staff, but in terms of experience and expertise, I think we are more advanced than before.
Okay, the good news, we are more experienced, which means that we can combine our regular task with OECD application process. And since we have been speaking about OECD accession, but it appears to us that it is not so widely recognized on behalf of many stakeholders. So what would you suggest, or what is the planned activities in your respective institution, if there are any already, to increase, how to say, the public participation, or to increase the level of understanding about the OECD, since of course it is meant to improve public policies, it is meant to improve the way we all live, but maybe we could also discuss a little bit what might be the outreach campaign, if you consider such campaign is needed. Actually, maybe we should start from this, because unlike the Euro accession, which is very close to all of us when it comes to changing the national currency, but when it comes to OECD, it is something that is not so maybe visible to the wider society. And so the question is, do you think a kind of a campaign might be needed? And if yes, are there any plans that are already drafted in order to increase the visibility or the understanding about the OECD in your respective institution?
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, you rightly mentioned that Euro and Schengen are somehow more known and understandable. But this is, I think, natural. This is because the changes that will come with our accession to the Eurozone or Schengen area are very tangible, and it will affect directly every one of us. While with the OECD, the benefits are not that obvious, and we won't feel them from day one to another. It is more long-term, and it will take time, let's say. We clearly see the need to raise awareness, as I said in the beginning, on OECD. And we have started with our colleagues from the other ministries preparing kind of, I wouldn't say a brochure, but summarizing the key messages that we can deliver on some key benefits, put down in an understandable way. So we have been working on this. We have first version, and this is slightly, and this is evolving work in progress, I would say. Because we need to really formulate these benefits in a way that will be understandable. Now, whether we need a dedicated communication strategy, probably, but to be honest, there are some ideas, not concrete work has started, but what we are doing, specific communication efforts and events are being planned, and we think a very appropriate way to raise awareness of the OECD is to organize special events every time when there is a report of the OECD prepared on Bulgaria, and there are already a number of them. For example, the economic review, which was published in January 2021, was a good opportunity to raise awareness of the OECD, and also to start discussing the the findings and the recommendations in this review. Now, this happens in the time of the pandemic, so I remember the presentation of the review was done in a virtual event and somehow didn't attract a lot of media interest. But now we have started work on the next economic review. The colleagues of Ministry of Finance, here I speak under their control. And so I know it is planned to be published next year. So this will be an opportunity to speak about OECD and to present what is OECD doing for Bulgaria. The investment policy review of Bulgaria was published in June, if I'm not mistaken. This is also a very important document prepared by OECD on Bulgaria, on Bulgaria's investment policy. And there are plans to organize an event on this report also. So little by little, with some concrete steps, we can, I believe, raise the awareness and engage in a more active, and probably the experts are the ones to be more involved, but also stemming from these expert discussions, we can reach out to the wider public and explain why OECD accession is important.
Sure. Just to mention that during some lectures that we have been giving to various stakeholders, especially foreign experts or representatives of foreign companies or foreign diplomatic missions, have been always asking recently about OECD because it is a benchmark for quality of public policy. So from a purely expert point of view, being part of the OECD is a kind of a guarantee that you're applying the same level of quality when it comes to legislation as it is in this most economically developed country. So on expert level, I think it is quite indisputable that it is a very important step forward. But as you mentioned, it is not that obvious to everyone what stands behind. In the meantime, if I'm looking to the audience, I see a hand which has been raised over there. You'll be having the chance to speak. Just briefly present yourself, and maybe we can collect your question with two of the questions that are on the screen behind of me. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. First, I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. And also, yes, I'm a former expert at the Ministry of Economy and current member of the academia. So my question is built on the last question that was raised by you regarding, and it is forwarded to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Balabanova, how the coordination mechanism includes academia. Because I think it's excellent to have the opportunity to use the expertise of OECD and the other member states. But also I think there's a huge untapped potential in Bulgaria that could contribute to this national effort. And yes, how do you plan to include academia more particularly in this coordination process? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, I should say, relevant question. Untapped potential, we could all agree that this is the case, and the question is really relevant. I have several other questions here in front of me, but maybe we can start with this one because the other are very technical and they are related to the given institution. So maybe Ms. Balabanova and all the other speakers feel free to share. Is there any plan or already track record of successfully involving academia in the process?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your readiness to contribute to this process. It is true that the interinstitutional coordination mechanism involves mainly government institutions and ministries, but there is also an opportunity envisaged in the mechanism to invite representatives of non-governmental organizations and of academia. So I think this is very important, and this is something that we will definitely need to do, especially in when the technical reviews start, because these technical reviews will they will evolve in different steps. They will probably start with detailed questionnaires sent from the OECD committees, and then there will be expert missions. And during these exchanges with the OECD, it will be important to involve also academia and non-governmental organizations. So this is an opportunity that we have and we will use. Also, the interinstitutional coordination mechanism has set up working groups on different areas that will be subject to these technical reviews. And there again, we envisage the opportunity to invite or to ask for inputs in the work of these working groups, experts from outside government institutions, from academia. So yes, this is envisaged and very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes.
I can just add that since we are in charge with the financial literacy topic, we have a working group for financial literacy. And in this working group, there are some universities that are presented. So they contribute a lot to the mission to improve and to raise the financial literacy and to implement the action plan. So we are doing this already.
Okay. And now I think we could start to be more specific. And I will start from the bottom. The question is regarding statistics, and it is the following. OECD statistics is well known for its quality and perhaps more detailed levels of analysis disaggregation. When should we expect similar statistics also for Bulgaria? Could you commit to a specific date maybe, or to explain on the process?
Yes, thanks for the question. Before answering the question, I would also like to make one comment on the questions raised before. The process of accession of the OECD will become very natural after we conclude the process of adoption of the euro. That's my personal opinion. So this is the topic which is also discussed right now. But then I think that the push for reforms, which will be much easier, and then the timeline for accession of the country in the OECD will be becoming more and more natural process. In terms of the question, maybe this is related to the accession of Bulgaria to the OECD and not in general. The specific date will be when the country is accepted as a member. I mean, that this will be a natural process in terms of not only the statistics, but in terms of economic alignment, investments, and so on. So, yes, of course, the preparation is very important, ensuring the data quality and comparability. Maybe there are some possible differences between, for example, the data which is provided to the Eurostat and those statistical data which is on the OECD requirements. But this will be determined in terms of a process and the technical review in terms of the statistical committee from the OECD. So this will have to be more detailed analysis in terms of the coverage does the national statistics has the same variables, time periods, which are published by the OECD countries, for example? I think that on the most part, the short answer would be yes. But for example, if there's something maybe more specific which has to be disaggregated in terms of more comparability in terms of, for example, on the macroeconomic statistics, this will have to be determined on a later stage. But of course, the compliance, the timeliness also have to be dealt with, because for the timely presenting of the statistical data will be also a key element, because the deadlines are getting very, very short in the recent years, not only by providing data to the Eurostat or other international organizations which have agreements with Bulgaria, but also in terms of OECD. Now the OECD uses the statistical data which the National Statistical Institute publishes. So we are also providing the data which is needed in terms of economic analysis and economic review and investment review as well.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And Mr. Petkov, obviously the first and the second questions are towards the national contact point. And if you allow me, I will try to combine them in a way. So the very first question is from Ola Peneva, and she has been asking or saying the following: business and human rights are widely covered in the OECD instruments such as the multinational enterprises guidelines. What is the Bulgarian government doing in this direction? And the second question is, how can the national contact point for responsible business contact become more widely recognized and sought out by the relevant stakeholders?
Well, thank you. As regarding the first one, I would say that we have a specific political situation right now in Bulgaria, and I truly hope that pretty soon we will have the right people in the right places, so that the government policy would be implemented as initially described. And I think the Bulgarian governments recently have done a lot in combining these two elements, and a lot of certain positive measures should be undertaken, have been undertaken, and will be undertaken. Bulgaria is my former colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs know pretty well, and we have worked together as regarding the human rights and the other element, and we are doing extremely well, I would say, in that aspect. As regarding the second question, we are extremely open to the national contact point, so just follow us and check the website that I gave you, because there is a lot of very fresh information over there. We're working constantly on that, and with the help of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in particular, I think we will do a very good job, so just follow it. As simple as that.
Okay. So, of course, we have to reach out. I mean, the platform is there.
Of course.
If there are no other questions from the audience, I have seen one in there, and maybe one more remained unanswered here on the screen. But before that...
Sorry, I decided to... I'm not sure you can see me. So, Petya Barzilska from S&P Market Intelligence. So what I saw from your speeches was very interesting. Thank you very much. But I think only Mr. Petkov didn't mention the word challenges. I think all of you mentioned it, and then you also are thinking that maybe in the next 3 years we can be thinking of an OECD Bulgaria's OECD accession. But maybe my question is a bit basic, but what are these challenges? Is it for example, the governance practices at state-owned companies? Is it anti-money laundering legislation? I mean, can you point to certain things that you believe would be they would be challenging for implementation?
Okay, thank you very much. So, in a nutshell, what are the short-term key challenges? If I took it correctly, what are the real challenges? I mean, the short-term key areas that you would like to ask about.
Well, I mean, short term, long term, I was asking about the legislative challenges because I see that you have, I mean, at the ministerial level, there is definitely the technical expertise. Maybe there are some capacity constraints, but there is the will there. But I mean, some of you mentioned a little bit the political challenges there. But I'm talking about the legislative, like in terms of what would be challenging to be implemented on the regulatory and legislative side. And are there any areas that you have identified in this stage? I mean, I realize that not everything is identified.
Okay, thank you very much. I think now it's much more clear to us. Maybe if somebody of you would like to just to briefly mention a very quick response to this. I mean, in terms of legislation, what might be the big challenge in the next month, maybe, because it's really difficult to speak for a horizon that exceeds, let's say, 1 year. But maybe when it comes to legislation, what lies ahead for you, for your institutions?
It's very simple. We need a working parliament, and and we need a steady government. It's as simple as that. That's all.
If I may, from the experience we have had until now, preparing for the accession process and working on it, we have identified that a challenging task would be to strengthen the so-called whole of government approach to certain areas. And nowadays, most of the challenges we face, not only in Bulgaria, require multi-sectoral, cross-sectoral approach. And in some areas, for example, I have in mind digital economy. This is a huge area that touches upon all aspects from health, social. It's not only about technology, it's human rights, if you wish. And there we need a very good coordination and interaction between different, not only between different sectors, but also between different levels of government. This is also true for other sectors. For example, management of infrastructure, for example. So as a whole, these challenges related to the multi-sectoral approach that is needed to address them would be, I would say, a challenging task for us. Now, as regards specific legislative amendments, I would say that the draft laws that are being prepared for the national recovery and what is the resilience plan, they would definitely help also our alignment with OECD standards. So these are some concrete legislative amendments in the pipeline, but further legislative amendments might be needed, and they will be identified during the course of the technical assessment, technical reviews within the substantive OECD committees.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Koleva.
I can share our experience so far. Since the European legislation is very concrete, we have regulations and we have directives. The regulations are directly applicable, so we just need sometimes to adopt some implementation rules. For directive, it's quite clear. We have the rules, we need to transpose them. In OECD legal acts, the legal acts are principle-based. So for us, the challenge is actually what to implement and how to implement it. And as Ms. Balabanova mentioned, they are sometimes very cross-sectoral. So we don't have clear rules, we have just principles. And the technique, how, and which are the involved authorities sometimes is challenged. And in the financial services sector, as I mentioned already, for most of the instruments, we declare ourselves like fully aligned. So for most of them, it's how to say, because the European legislation is very well developed in this sector, but for new topics, like for example, sustainable finance, digitalization, it's a challenge because it's coming from the European side, but it's not there yet. We are working on these topics. And since they are very new for all the member states and for OECD member states as well, so for us it's a challenge. This is, from our perspective.
Okay, since we are heading to the coffee break and we have to make it really on time because we need some technical issues when it comes to involving our remote speakers, maybe I would like to ask you for one final sentence on behalf of all of you. Whether in your institution you have formal or informal exchange or experience with any specific OECD member as a form of a technical assistance, and in what areas? Obviously, we know that I would like maybe to somehow to bridge this with the second question here about the management of state-owned enterprises, which is also one of the crucial issues when it comes to talks with the OECD. And I would like to refer here that one of the results of our bilateral cooperation with Korea is the fact that you can see it over there, a booklet with research papers on topics of mutual interest, and within our next generation Korea Fellowship Incubator, we have a very well-grounded research paper on the Korean experience in reforming state-owned enterprises and how it could be useful for Bulgaria. So please make sure to grab a copy of this publication over there. But before that, maybe one final question. Any exchanges, formal or informal, with specific OECD members that have been already in place in your capacity in your institution?
Well, a number of OECD member states have already declared their readiness to support us and help us wherever we need. From the perspective of the foreign ministry, we have contacts, and at this stage we are more discussing how to strengthen, let's say, our coordination mechanism and make it more effective. But in terms of specific areas where different member states can help us, I believe this will come up when the technical review starts, and there in the discussions with the member states we will be able to identify very specific issues, but probably my colleagues in dealing with specific topics can add to this.
Do you have any experience with specific OECD members on specific issues?
I can share our experience so far, since we already participate committees physically. We have this opportunity to have informal communication with OECD members and with OECD candidate countries. So we exchange some views, we exchange some information, how is their preparation going. We have some feedback from Lithuania and from Latvia about their accession period, because they are the member states who joined the OECD the latest periods. Of course, their experience is not that relevant because the legal acts there are some new legal acts and the procedure will be different, but it's very useful in terms of the assessment periods, how the assessment is going, and yes. So we already had this experience. Informally, as I mentioned, we exchanged some information with the candidate countries in Paris. And we rely very much on the old members of OECD for their support during the process.
Okay. Okay, if anybody of you wants to add something.
Maybe in short, but this is like some personal informal communication which I had in terms of the economic analysis and policy with the acting chief economist, Mr. Alvaro Pereira. But this is more like a personal one. But for example, the cooperation between the statistical offices in members of the OECD, which are also members of the European Union, is also very good. For example, like the Czech Republic, also some other countries. But in terms of more, I'd say, a better cooperation, the statistical office in Bulgaria has the better cooperation with countries in the sea region.
Okay, so we are almost right on time. I would like to say thank you to all the speakers for their time and for their professional and personal commitment to the topic of Bulgaria's accession to the OECD. I would like to thank you, both people in the audience here in the Vasilevsky Hall, but also the people who are in front of their screens, for being active in making this hybrid questions and answers session possible. Now I have one technical question for all those of you who are in front of their screens. Please make sure to be here at 12 Eastern European Time or at 11 Central European Time. We are continuing with the second panel when we are going to speak about the Korean experience, about the road to OECD in Croatia and in Romania. So thank you once again for being with us. And now for all the people who are live in Sofia, there is a well-deserved coffee break outside. So please take the most of the time and the networking opportunity.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have enjoyed the short break. On behalf of the Economic Policy Institute and our partners from the Embassy of the Republic of Korea here in Bulgaria, I would like to thank you, those of you who are still in the home, and of course those of you joining us online. We want to wrap up this event and this public discussion on OECD membership, or the path to OECD membership of Bulgaria and the countries in the CE region, by also providing this very important, from our opinion, regional dimension, because indeed the three countries, Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia, in many ways have followed similar development paths and have joined important and have reached important thresholds together, such as Bulgaria and Romania joining the European Union back in 2007, and of course Croatia a few years afterwards. So we wanted to provide, in a way, a platform for informal exchange and to see to what extent there is a logic behind it, and we firmly believe there is, for the three countries to cooperate and to leverage each other's expertise, experience, in order to ensure that the whole of the CE region, and especially at least the EU member states, countries within the CE region, could together in a speedy way accomplish this foreign policy priority, new foreign policy priority of joining the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But before we move to our partners from Croatia and Romania, I would first like to offer also the opportunity to gain from the experience of the Republic of Korea as an OECD member since 1996, and why this experience is relevant for us. Although the membership happened a long time ago for this country, it is specifically because of the, I would say, quite unique and very successful development path that Korea has taken in order to transform itself from one of the poorest back in the 1950s following the wars on the Korean Peninsula to now what is known as the miracle on the Han River. It's really a modern economy within the top 20 economies in the world, but is highly innovative and technologically advanced, and also a country that is now readily sharing its development experience with the world, especially in the field of good governance and in using, for example, technology in governance, but also in many other areas. So this is why we decided to start with these introductory remarks on Korea's own OECD experience and how there might be some useful information or guidelines for countries like Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia on their path towards OECD membership. So I have the pleasure to have here with me at the panel in person Councillor Byung-Hyun Yoo from the Embassy of the Republic of Korea, who will make a short introduction. Councillor Yoo, you have the floor.
Okay, yeah. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to have an opportunity to make a brief before the brilliant video presentation on Korea's experience of OECD by the Dr. Sang-ha Yoon from Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, so KIEP. Because he's now in Korea, so he sent us the video presentation for about 5 minutes, around 5 minutes. So before displaying his video presentation, I will shortly introduce the Korea's experience of OECD. Korea joined the OECD as the 29th member of OECD member country in December 1996. Even though there were domestic opposition against its entry into OECD, however, for Korea at that time, it was not an option, but a must. In 1990s, after 3 decades of rapid economic growth, Korea found that its old development strategy was no longer available and sought a new strategy that enables to provide it with the momentum to achieve stable and sustainable economic development. Considering OECD's major role is to lead discussions on economic development of member countries and the whole world economy, OECD would provide Korea with a good opportunity to follow up new trends of world economy and to share experiences with other member countries so that Korea could pave the new way toward economic reform. The past 26 years of Korea's development has shown that Korea's decision at that time to join OECD was right. After joining OECD, Korea has promoted a variety of domestic reforms via adopting OECD's policy recommendations in a variety of fields, including attraction of foreign capital, deregulation, and anti-corruption, and sharing experience with the existing member countries that already achieved its economic developments, and through peer review by OECD. Korea accordingly has achieved the massive and visible growth in not only in the quantitative development, but also in qualitative development too. Such Korea's experience of OECD proves that joining the OECD has a significant meaning to one country's economy by providing motivation for economic and social growth of member countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Bulgaria, for the purpose of obtaining motivation for new economic growth, also has made various efforts to join the OECD. The Korean government also has well-known, consistent efforts that has done by Bulgaria. Thus, hope that such efforts can bear fruits in the near future. On the occasion of international seminar today, Bulgarian government's many efforts to join the OECD will be presented, and also experience sharing with other countries will be made through the other countries like Croatia or Romania, and so on. I hope that the seminar today will, and this session, through the sharing the experience with other countries, Bulgaria can have some useful lessons for its joining OECD. Now, please pay attention to the presentation of Dr. Sang-ha Yoon from Kiev. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yu, for these remarks. Indeed, may I ask the technical team to show the video on the screen? I think we no longer need any explanation why it is important to use every opportunity to gain experience from other OECD members. And Dr. Sang-ha Yoon, who is the head of the International Macroeconomics team at one of the largest think tanks in Korea, the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, will share some specific insights in policy and sectoral policy areas and sectors where OECD experience truly made a difference for Korea's development. So now we can play the video, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sang-ha Yoon from Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. It is my great pleasure and honor to share the experience of South Korea. In 1996, Korea was fully invited to become the 29th member of the OECD as the second Asian country after Japan. It has been 26 years since we became the member. We got a lot of help from OECD since then. OECD has provided policy advice to Korea to advance Korean institutions, to reform the economic and social sector, and to upgrade the overall Korean economy. Specifically, OECD advised to increase economic efficiency by reducing various market regulations and promoting foreign investments, and to improve social welfare by resolving labor market dualism and encouraging female labor market participation. In addition, OECD recommended to form the base for innovation by upgrading the quality of universities and enhancing the intellectual property rights, and to improve efficiency of tax system by relying more on indirect taxes. Korea has accepted the OECD recommendations and applied them in formulating related policies. The government relaxed market entry regulations, primarily in services, and reduced the number of administrative procedures for market entry. Korea implemented FTAs that include agriculture with the EU, Asian countries, and other countries. The government relaxed the regulations on the foreign firms by increasing foreign ownership ceilings too. According to the OECD recommendations, the government introduced the free job training programs for non-regular workers, expanded the coverage of unemployment insurance to some of self-employed workers, and subsidized social insurance for low-wage workers in firms with less than 5 workers. In order to encourage female labor force participation, the government provided vouchers that provide free childcare to children under the age of 5, regardless of their household income, and increased the number of high-quality part-time jobs in the public sector. Also, parents are allowed to reduce working hours following maternity leave. Again, according to the OECD recommendations, the disclosure of some key information by universities was mandated in 2008 to strengthen competition, and the government enacted the Basic Law on Intellectual Property Rights. Also, the government extended the coverage of the value-added tax to some areas of medical and educational services. Thanks to the help of OECD and fellow member countries, we achieved economic success in terms of GDP level, as you can see, and the volume of trade, and strengthening of manufacturing industries and research and development, and transformation into the digital economy. But this does not mean that we don't have any problems at all. Rather, still there are many challenges ahead that we should tackle. First one is that there's a dramatic change in demographics. Our fertility rate is less than 1, and as a result, we are in the phase of decreasing population. This will cause a lot of problems in dependency ratio and fiscal and pension issues in the future. Second, we still work too much. Our working hours are longer than the average of OECD, and this is causing the unbalance between work and personal life. Third, wage inequality is aggravating, and this is partly because we still have labor market dualism. Another issue consistent with other countries is the market power of a small number of big firms becomes more serious. Even if we tried socioeconomic gender gap still exists and is even the worst among member countries. Finally, we should tackle environmental issues because we are heavily dependent on energy-intensive manufacturing industries and fossil fuels. Nonetheless, with thanks to the fellow member countries, we can come this far from the ashes in 1950s. I hope our experience will help your countries too. Thank you very much.
Well, we would like to thank Dr. Yoon for his remarks. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us live, and I hope you will excuse him for that, but the time difference with Korea provided some restrictions on that. Nevertheless, I believe the message was heard loud and clear that Korea is open to provide such kind of assistance. And in fact, I think we could already identify several policy areas that are common for the two countries and that require further exploration. And before we moved forward with the panel, I would just like to remind you that there is another opportunity to in fact go deeper in these topics next Friday, when at the Bulgaria-Korea Policy Forum we will be hearing several policy papers and recommendations presented exactly in these areas, where we would compare the experience, let's say, of Bulgaria and Korea in terms of tackling the demographic crisis that both countries are facing. We will be discussing gender gaps and gender equality as a problem, and of course competition policy, as well as innovation and environmental issues. Decarbonization, energy efficiency are also topics that are on the agenda. But now let us move back to the regional perspective, or so to speak, the platform for informal exchange between Bulgaria as a candidate country and the other two candidate countries in the region, Croatia and Romania. Unfortunately, I have to announce that State Secretary Luca Niculescu from the Romanian Foreign Ministry won't be able to join us due to unavoidable responsibilities at home. However, I'm very glad to say that we do have some Romanian representation in the hall. Before that, however, we moved to Zagreb and to Croatia, and I would like to say good morning and thank you for joining us to Mrs. Irena Alashbek, who is the Acting Director General for Economic Affairs and Development Cooperation within the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs of Croatia. Mrs. Alashbek, you have the floor. We're very curious to hear what the OECD membership means to Croatia, the approach your country has taken towards that, especially in terms of your interinstitutional process. What are the main challenges perhaps that Croatia is also facing, and the main opportunities related to OECD membership? Thank you in advance for joining us today. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you for inviting us to share our view as well and our experience. I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to listen to the discussions the entire morning, because from the presentations that I hear now from the Korea, I understand it was very interesting and useful. And thank you also for giving us the opportunity to hear the Korean valuable experience because I understand we share many same concerns and the same approach to the OECD and the benefits that the OECD brings to its member states. So I was really glad to hear that it was also said by the Korean representatives about the benefits of having a peer review by colleagues in some of the most developed states in the world to share their views on policy making and on better governance to help raise living standard and improve economic and investment climate in each of our countries. So I guess it is not necessary to repeat again what the benefits of the memberships are and how they are perceived from Croatian side as well. Just brief, like the general idea of benefit of membership of in the OECD is the reputational benefit of being a part of the club of the most developed and well-aligned countries in the world. It, in our view, helps bring investor confidence to improve investment climate in our country and to help economic growth in general. We see it as an opportunity for access to the knowledge on the most effective methods of solving complex matters. As we heard, complex matters and global issues are the same now. As the word says, global, we all have the same concerns nowadays, to exchange the best practices with the most developed countries, access to the OECD expertise, but not only expertise that is developed through the guidances and the documents and policy paper that OECD Secretariat does, but also to exchange the expertise with the peers around the world. And we see the whole process of accession to the OECD as an encouragement and incentive and support for domestic reform that we want to undertake and improve our policies in many policy areas yet. Our experience, Croatia's accession to the OECD and the aspiration to become an OECD member came very early in our statehood. We, as soon as after we gained our independence in the 1990s, beginning of 1990s, we already expressed our interest to join the OECD and benefit from the OECD best practices. But at that time, our foreign policy priorities were, of course, joining the EU and joining the WTO as a part of the EU process as well. So only after achieving those two goals, we started more formally with our process of accession to the OECD and submitted request for membership in 2017. As you know, we are members of the EU since 2013. And we started with the process of discussions and accessions to the individual committees in the OECD, in the individual policy areas that we found were most relevant for us at that time, and that we were suggested by the OECD Secretariat also and other members that we could benefit from. At that point, we started several policy reviews, investment policy review, regulatory policy review, and through that process of acceding to individual committees in the OECD and acceding to the individual instruments such as Declaration on Multinational Enterprises, we already understood how the whole process of the accession will look like and how much we can benefit as an acceding country from the process itself. because throughout the process, we realized that we will have a strong team of experts in the OECD that will help us review, identify, and improve our policies in each policy areas and give us recommendations on certain next steps that need to be taken to be fully aligned with the OECD policies and be more competitive in the economic sense. The intensive process of our accession and the full speed activities started in a bit later, 2019, 2020, and last year when we established a coordination group that will be in charge of our accession process. The coordination group that consists of members of each governmental body, but also included the representatives of the business associations, of the trade unions, and all the relevant stakeholders that are involved and relevant for creating state policies. In the previous period of time, as of January this year, actually, when the OECD Council approved Croatia's request to join the OECD together with the Romania and Bulgaria and also Brazil and Peru, and in May this year, when this coordination group has been established, the roadmap goes more or less similar as for other member states. So on June 10, the OECD Council adopted the accession roadmap for Croatia. We had a kickoff mission as the official start of the accession process in July in Zagreb. And we started working on the preparation of our initial memorandum to join the OECD, of our self-assessment on our alignment with all the relevant OECD instruments. I can proudly present that it was yesterday that the government of Croatia adopted the text of initial memorandum and submitted it to the OECD Secretariat, and we are now ready and looking forward to start working with the OECD on our in-depth technical reviews and working the substantive committees in accordance with our accession roadmap, and wait for the assessment by our counterparts in the OECD on the actual assessment on our policies with the OECD policies, and look forward to hear the recommendations and continue our work on the accession process. So what I wanted to end up with is that regardless of how long this process will take and the final outcome, which is our goal and beneficial in itself, we find a lot of benefits and a lot of merit in the process itself, which help us self-assess our policies, analyze our policies in more depth, and hear peer review from other member states, members that are already there in the OECD and understand what the OECD work is about. And I would also like to say that I appreciate very much, Ms. Trifonova, what you said about the need and benefits of cooperation of the acceding candidates in the region. It goes without saying that in some, I would dare in a lot of the policies, Croatia, Romania, and Bulgaria already have a common ground, all three being the members of the European Union and sharing the same policies and having actually the common policies with the EU, especially in trade area, which is a common we have common commercial policy, which is the exclusive competence of the EU. So it is only natural that we cooperate in this field and that we have the same starting point, so to say, but also to cooperate in other policy areas that are part of the EU as well. I'm looking forward to hear also Bulgarian and Romanian view on the accession process, and I'm here available for any questions that you might have or anyone in the room. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Alashbek. I think we already started this useful exchange. You mentioned that Croatia has established a coordination group comprised of members of each government body, as well as representatives of the business and the trade unions. And in the previous panel 1, we discussed Bulgaria's own interinstitutional coordination mechanism, how it operates. So, of course, we'll make sure to provide to you also the recording if it's useful for your own consideration. Of course, congratulations on the Croatian government's adoption of the text of the initial memorandum, an important first step. And we also wish you good luck with the technical review. I think because you probably have to leave us a bit early, I understood, I would like to urge the people both in the venue and joining us online to go back to Slido if they have any specific questions regarding the Croatian experience. And I would ask the technical staff to show us again the option how to send out your questions. But I'm eager now to perhaps give the floor to a Romanian representative, just for something very short, to let us know what Romania's own approach has been. And I'm very grateful that today with us we have Mr. Radu Călin Moldovan, Minister Counselor at the Office of Commercial and Economic Promotion at the Romanian Embassy here in Sofia. Mr. Radu.
Thank you very much. Despite the fact you have not an official at the high level from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Romanian Embassy in Sofia is present here with pleasure. And I use this opportunity to congratulate the organizer and to thanks for this invitation. Regarding the Romania and Bulgaria and Croatia in the last time are in the same basket, if I can say, in the same box, in this road to the European Union and to OECD, and not only to this, and to the Schengen. Regarding the OECD, I follow all the presentation from my personal point of view. Romania followed the same step like other country. And because the embassy in one country is to connect the institution, I tell you that the Romanian embassy here will be a bridge between all the institutions involved in this process, between Bulgarian and Romania. Please use this possibility and accept my readiness to help everybody else. Thank you very much for your time and for your pleasant company here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moldovan. Now I am turning our attention to the questions in Slido. If we could have them on the screen. And I see two questions at the moment, both referring to Croatia, I believe. So the first one, Mrs. Alashbek, I'll have to read it for you. Is there any at least preliminary accession date under discussion in Croatia? I understand this is more of a internal target set by the Croatian government. And the second one is how the euro adoption will help Croatia towards its OECD accession, because obviously Croatia is probably the only of the three countries a bit ahead in that process. Bulgaria and Romania are yet to join the Eurozone, and we are actually here in Bulgaria at the moment in ardent discussions about the Eurozone accession process. So we would really are interested in the Croatian experience in that regard. So the two questions are, any preliminary date set in Croatia for OECD membership, and how OECD and Eurozone membership interact or maybe leverage one another in the case of Croatia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both questions. The timeline question and the deadline is in one that is being frequently asked by many stakeholders here in Croatia and externally as well. For us, we sort of had a preliminary date in mind that would go until 2024, but in our accession process now that we started and the discussions with the OECD, we understood that the in-depth technical analysis that I mentioned and technical reviews by the committees will actually take much longer, and that it is not really realistic to expect that they would last less than 3 years from the date of the start. So, I mean, so with that in mind, we would hope, that our internal deadline would be as soon as possible for us to accede, and we will do our best to contribute to the speeding up of that process. But it was probably mentioned also previously, the review will go for us in 26 different committees. It will cover 247 different instruments. It will involve all the relevant state policies, and it will probably require us to adopt some new laws and amend or modify some of the existing ones. So really, we now are aware that it is a long-term process, but we are still hoping that within 3 years period time, it will be feasible to achieve that goal. On the Eurozone, yes, I don't know if I mentioned through my presentation, but one of 3 of our recent foreign policy goals were Schengen area accession, Eurozone accession, and the OECD accession. So we are on a good way, I believe, with all 3 of them. And the Eurozone, in correlation with the OECD, we believe, the goal is the same, actually, to improve the competitiveness, to raise the attractiveness of Croatia, to improve the overall economic environment. So we hope that the accession to the Eurozone will already bring some benefits that will help us also with the accession to the OECD. So we have already, through this process, we were obliged to meet certain standards that will be also required by the OECD membership.
Thank you, Mrs. Auersbeck. I think indeed it is important to mention that this technical review is indeed an enormous process taking a long time, but the 3 countries are determined to go that way. So maybe before we return to the questions in Slido, just to see if on the Romanian side we have a similar, let's say, internal target date for OECD membership set or not yet. Okay, great. Then, because I know that we might not be able to have Mrs. Auersbeck until the end with us, I would like to also use my privilege as a moderator to ask you, in your opinion, and looking into the process and being one of the key institutions handling this process, what are the main challenges that you expect for Croatia to face along these paths? For example, in the case of Bulgaria, we discussed that some legislative initiatives would be vital, maybe specific policy areas where Croatia would need to strengthen its resolve and political will, but also, let's say, governmental and public efforts in order to meet these highest standards and best practices set by OECD. Do you have such areas in mind that would require special attention on behalf of Croatia?
We I can only share what has already been informally and through this process communicated to us from the OECD side and from some of the other member states of the OECD in some of the committees. So we expect that there will be some requests for us to make some certain steps on administrative reform, some of the administrative reforms, and some of the judiciary reforms. These are the areas that, for the time being, we are aware that some certain amendments or modification or efforts will be required from us. Other than that, there are certain policy areas which were not legislated in Croatia previously and would need to be taken into account now, such as maybe not huge policy areas, but some elements that we so far didn't consider, like there are instruments on transparency in lobbying or that kind of instruments that are actually accessory instruments to some of the other reforms and policy areas. And apart from that, as I said, we, in the main policy areas that are, related to economic and trade liberalization, national treatment, and all those big important instruments that OECD promotes, we have already undergone a set of reforms and alignments in our process of accession to the EU, which was actually not so far away. We only acceded to EU in 2013. So this will be sort of a review and a markup to our EU process of alignment of our legislation to the EU rules.
And if you would allow me to follow up on what you just said, because also in the previous panel focusing on Bulgaria, we made the same conclusion that because of the experience of EU membership and EU negotiations, accession negotiations, Bulgaria feels better prepared for the task at hand, basically the OECD accession talks. But in this regard, I see that there is a question on Slido where there are any linkages or maybe let's say, synergies between OECD-related policy reforms and the reforms needed under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. This is both for Croatia specifically, and if you want to add on Romania, but I don't want to pressure you to answer these questions. So are there any overlaps between OECD-related reforms and reforms under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan within the EU membership?
Yes, well, thank you for that question. That is a really good question, and we are really happy to say that there is a lot of overlapping, and that these two actually requirements under the recovery plan and the OECD accession are not only compatible, but in some ways even identical. So we were also happy to report in our self-assessment to the OECD that part of the reforms and the part of the alignment that will need to take place under the OECD accession is already scheduled under our National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So yes, this will be a huge benefit that these two processes will go in parallel and complement each other.
Thank you. And the final question that I see in Slido, unless we have additional questions from the venue, is maybe a bit about communication and focusing your diplomatic efforts. And I think this is probably a relevant question for all three countries. Would you consider, or does your government already has a strategy with regard to whose support is the most important or vital when it comes to successfully finalizing accession talks, the OECD Secretariat or the individual support of individual member states? I would probably receive an answer that both are important, but does Croatia have any communication strategy or diplomatic efforts specifically targeting, let's say, certain member countries or the Secretariat in general?
Well, I wouldn't call it a strategy, but maybe it is wise to consider one. We do have a lot of diplomatic efforts towards both, as you say, very predictable answer, but we are fully aware. We are fully aware that it is the member states of the OECD that decide. And the whole process of even the in-depth technical reviews goes through the OECD committees, where member states delegates are the ones that are able to ask any questions and make the final decision. So, and finally, the Council of the OECD decides, and the Council is a political body consisting of members of the diplomats from each member states. So it is really, we are fully aware that it is highly relevant to communicate to the member states of the OECD. We already are in this process. We were made aware of that also by the OECD throughout their visits to Croatia and kick-off missions, and through, as I mentioned in my presentation, through our process of accession to each individual instrument and the committee that we've done before this overall project, because we, even through those missions of the OECD to Croatia, where they were doing those in-depth reviews, we understood that besides meetings with the government officials and all the analysis that we have prepared ourselves, the OECD Secretariat, they hold meetings and communicate regularly and seek feedback from embassies of the OECD members in Croatia, from the business community, from the Foreign Investors Council, and from the trade unions within Croatia. So they get feedback from member states of the OECD on many levels. And we also try to use all of our diplomatic efforts to speak to the diplomats from the OECD members on each occasion about the relevance of the OECD membership for us, the relevance of the process, and seek their feedback and listen carefully to their feedback on what are their expectations of our accession process and where the problems might lie. So we already, through those contacts, we have received some hints, so to say, from OECD members in which policy areas we will need to step up our efforts to align with the OECD policies.
So if I understood you correctly, and if I am allowed to paraphrase, I think the diplomatic efforts of the three countries should be multifaceted, multidirectional, and probably multidimensional. And indeed, I hope that this seminar was a small step in that direction, also because we're bringing together the three candidate countries from the region, but also with the kind support of another long-standing OECD member, the Republic of Korea. With that, I would like to thank, of course, Mrs. Auersbeck for joining us from Zagreb, Mr. Moldovan for representing Romania, our Korean partners, Councillor Yu, and from a distance, Dr. Yoon from the Korea Institute of International Economic Policy. Of course, I would like to express our greatest words of gratitude to all of you here today at the venue in Vasilevsky Hall of Hyatt Regency Hotel, but also those joining us online via the Zoom webinar. I hope that this is just a start, a first step in many more such public initiatives where we, the think tank community, the civil society could initiate such dialogue and promote greater awareness about OECD accession process and the meaning of OECD membership for Bulgaria and for the other countries in the region, and of course be in a way a bridge, a form of informal let's say platform for exchange between the three countries. I would once again thank you for your attention and for being with us today. I would like to wish everyone to enjoy the rest of their Friday afternoon, and those of you here at the venue, we're more than welcome to join us for lunch. I understand that our partners from the embassy have prepared some special treats in the form of Korean food. So those of you who are, let's say, food enthusiasts would have the exclusive opportunity to try something very nice. Once again, Mrs. Sawarspek, thank you so much, and I believe we will continue these exchanges in the future on behalf of the Economic Policy Institute and our partners. Enjoy the rest of your day.